Welcome to Tourism Talk. I'm your host, Mary Hammond, Director of the Paducah Convention and Visitors Bureau. And I have two guests today, and I would like to welcome Gail Kaler, Mayor Pro Tem of the City of Paducah, and Rosemarie Steele, my co-worker and Marketing Director of the Paducah Convention and Visitors Bureau. Welcome. Thank you.
Glad to be here.
Yes, I am too. I'm excited to share with the folks watching our program our quest to join UNESCO Creative Cities Network. We were fortunate enough to have traveled to Seoul, South Korea this past month to present Paducah's application to join the Creative Cities Network. But it's been a journey that started a little over 2 years ago, and I think we'll just start at the beginning and tell this story and get excited along the way. Rosemarie, you kick it off. Most people go, UNESCO, what in the world is that? You've heard about it, you've grown up hearing about UNESCO, but do you really know what it is?
That's right, Mary. UNESCO stands for United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. And it is a subcommittee of the United Nations. The Creative Cities Network was launched by UNESCO in 2004, and its aim was enhancing creative, social, and economic potential of cultural industries for cities that provide gateways for cultural diversity. Mm-hmm. And we first heard about the Creative Cities Network in 2008 when Paducah was invited to a creative tourism conference in Santa Fe, New Mexico. It was the first global conversation of its kind, and of course those words, creative tourism, really resonated with us. And so I went, and two representatives from the Paducah Renaissance Alliance went with me.
And Robin Malpass.
And Robin Malpass.
Our marketing consultant agency. Right. Yes.
That's right. And so that was where we first heard of UNESCO and the Creative Cities Network. There were presentations done, and a lot of people were talking about creative tourism, and it's a very interesting story, really. The creative tourist is an offshoot from the cultural tourist, and these are people who love to be embraced in a community's culture, that authenticity of place, which is part of our dozen distinctive destinations criteria.
That sounds pretty familiar.
Seriously. So upon our return from that conference, we took inventory of some of the creative experiences or workshops, hands-on experiences that existed in the destination, and we were just totally amazed at what was available here. First of all, the AQS is really the leader in that, because probably around 3,500 people take classes during those 3-4 days that they are here. And the National Quill Museum has classes with internationally celebrated instructors throughout the year, and probably about 500 people attend those classes. So we looked through Lower Town, and we found so many artists who are offering these experiences.
I have had some of those experiences myself.
So
and not just Lower Town, but in downtown, and I have to share them. On my mother's birthday one year, when Susan Edwards had working artists there at the corner of 2nd and Broadway, we had a birthday party, and my mother's friends, my friends, we all came together and we painted. We took a painting class. I've done it with Lorraine Schramke. In fact, she's got some of those hanging in her home. We're talking about people who have never held a paintbrush, except maybe when you were in grade school. Or there was the time that the Rotary Group Study Exchange team came from Germany, and we went to working artists and did marbling. And I saw these guys, they were engineers, and they were sort of like, kind of rolling their eyes, okay, what are we gonna do? Well, they were the ones in line to do it twice because it was such an experience. But I've only had a few, there's a few other classes I've talked about, but this is really something that's happening. People want hands-on.
They really do. They're looking to be immersed in your destination. We have so many, as I was saying, opportunities in Lower Town, and as you mentioned, in downtown with Pat English and her specialty embroidering that she does, that she's taught all over the world. So we have always operated as a global community when it comes to the arts. And it just seemed like the next natural progression for Paducah to look at the Creative Cities Network.
As almost simultaneously, going back and forth a little bit, we had been working with the National Trust for Historic Preservation on the dozen distinctive destinations and found that many of the criteria were very similar. Although Creative Cities doesn't get into the architecture or preservation, not under our designation, which we wanted to be crafts and folk art. There are other designations within the Creative Cities network. Literature, as Iowa City is in the United States, cinema, music, design, media arts, gastronomy. But the only other craft and folk art designation in the United States is Santa Fe. How nice for Paducah to have recognition by our peers in cities around the globe as a community, a creative city for folk art and craft.
Absolutely.
And even though we have depth in our cultural assets, I'm learning your terms, Rosemary, in our cultural assets, the real depth to answer the questions or write to the grant, as many people would understand, came in quilting or fiber arts. Is that not right?
It really did. One of the things, the very first criteria was a long-standing tradition or a history of crafts. And you know, you do it so well in your presentation when you started off talking about our ancestors and how they came here and they brought with them their folk arts and their crafts. Now, folk art is basically functional art. And so these were things that people used to survive. And you speak to the fact that they brought with them the art of quilt making.
They did, from their immigrant ancestors. And then as they came through the Cumberland Gap and down the Ohio River into the new frontier, those quilts became something more than to keep you warm. They became self-expressions. Think about that pioneer woman. There wasn't a lot of ways to use your talent, your artistic talent. You were so busy with the manual business of keeping your family going on a daily basis. But this became a way to express your feelings. And
it also became a way for for women to connect with each other because
socially.
Right, because they were separated. They lived on farms, so they would get together and have their quilting. They would roll the quilt frame down from the ceiling and talk about their children and their families, and it was a way for them to relax also.
They weren't looking at someone's work on their phone or,
right.
or texting one another. They were sitting around taking the stitches and talking. Is that what happens at your house during Quilt Show?
Oh, sure.
Just about. Well, you do have quilters each year, don't you?
Yes, we did. We had two lovely people with us last year, a lady from Dubai that we were so fond of we didn't even charge her. We said, you know, we've enjoyed having you here so much. And a lady from Louisville who was a writer and was working on a book. So,
oh, that's interesting.
Really nice.
Well, you know, Rosemary really keeps up with those writers and their books because you never know when we can help one another. Is it Meg Cox, who's one of them, who's become our friend?
She's the one that did the article in the Wall Street Journal on quilting and the economic impact of it. But backing up a little, getting into Kentucky's history in quilt making, because that was one of the things that was of concern to the Creative Cities Network. How is quilting unique to Paducah? Well, it took a little research, but we found out that Kentucky was the first state that started a documentary project, and they had these quilt days throughout the state. There were 12 of them. One of them was held in Paducah, and they brought out all these quilts that had been in attics or in closets and started looking at the fabric and the stories behind the quilts. Well, they were so organized with this project that it went nationwide right away, and within a year it went international. So already we have a global connection with quilting.
Yes. That documentation program really did. I'm looking at my notes here. Next thing you knew, it was Australia, Canada, New Zealand, South Africa, all over participating in this project. I remember when they did it here, one of the stories that I loved, they were not only looking at the fabrics, but then the patterns that the women had brought with them as they traveled and settled our country, but also patterns that they created. And there was one quilt pattern they'd never seen before, and it turned up in 2 locations, both coasts. And it turns out part of the family went to California. They never quite knew what happened to that family, that member, but when those quilt patterns surfaced, they were able to connect, and I loved that story.
It is beautiful because it brings it down to a personal level.
Yes, it really does. Well, the Quilt Project's just one way. The National Quilt Museum of the United States, how fortunate we are to have a 20-year-old museum that has been recognized by the Congress, the U.S. Congress, as the National Quilt Museum of the United States. Each year the Quilt Museum debuts about a dozen new exhibits. We are on the cutting edge of quilting. Some of the best quilters in the world exhibit here, teach here, and live here. Carol Fallard, our own rock star of quilting. We're so proud of her. And Eleanor Burns, who's, gosh, had a TV program for probably close to 30 years now. How fortunate we are to have both of them have moved to Paducah, as well as those, Pat English, who moved here from up in the Chicago area.
Right.
Have moved and made this home and helped quilting really carry on. Of course, then you also have to have those deep businesses such as Schrader Publishing and Collector Books that are publishing books about quilting, soliciting people to write their stories about quilting styles. Aren't they getting ready to do a book in Japanese, I believe?
Yes, they're contemplating doing, and that will be the first of their kind, which was of interest to UNESCO as well. But another criteria was contemporary production of crafts, which we do have that going on with Carol Breyer-Fallard. Even though she is more of a quilt artist, quilts are still constructed the way they were in the very beginning by piecing and layering, you know, your backing and your oh gosh, the quilters are beyond me for not really knowing, but the batting and then the quilt tops. So the contemporary production of crafts was really important to them, but not just even in quilting. They were very interested in some of the crafts that were being done in Lower Town and throughout Paducah. A strong presence of artisans was another thing that was important to them. And these are people who are actually making their living as artists. So we were able to really feature those in the application. A lot of the people are doing crafts that are timeless, age-old processes like the leather crafting that Phil Phillips does, the marbling processes, the bookbinding processes, the jewelry making that, you know, Julie Shaw does. And I know there's many more that I, you know, could name, especially if I had the application in front of me. But, you know, so it's all of those folk arts that were of importance to them.
I love the way that you see folk arts, but how they're being incorporated into fiber art and quilting now, that you're seeing more embellishments of pieces that could be earrings, could be a button, or you're seeing the painting skills being taken to the fiber so that it's not always dyed ahead of time.
Right.
There's just, it's endless.
It is, and that's one of the things that they say, the contemporary processes are informing the traditional processes. So you talked about me having those words. That's an example of some of the things that they were looking for, some of the things that they're interested in. Because, you know, that does happen. I mean, there is such a transition with politics, with history, especially in the field of quilt making, and sewing machines have changed over the years. The processes of creating and printing of the fabrics, all of that, it all plays into the Creative Cities Network application. You know, how we need each other. We are, some of the sewing machines that are being made overseas are being sold in the United States. Some of the creative cities are producing some of the most popular sewing machines, the Brother sewing machine, which is being sold here in Paducah.
And of course, English Sewing Machine has been a part of this movement. But
they have, Mary, and the reason why is because they started off as a company that catered to the crafter, but they changed with all the technical advances that were being made in sewing machines, and now they have these elaborate embroidery machines, and people are starting cottage businesses in Paducah and in other places because this was a family who was willing to grow and change with the industry. And now they bring in instructors who are the people who created these sewing machines, and so people are coming from all over the world to take classes at English sewing machines.
I was just looking here here, the next thing was training centers related to crafts and folk art related occupations. And of course, English, it's the whole gambit. It's from Englishes to the School of Art. Absolutely. Where the city and the college had the foresight to see that this is something we really needed here in Paducah. And I love what has happened in just the last few years, that an attendance at the art school is far surpassing what they expected. And it's a 3-phase project, and it's underway. I think they've outgrown their space downtown.
They have, yes.
It's very exciting. I know when we went to Washington, and that was one of the priorities as we spoke to our elected officials, as well as the arts-related organizations in D.C. Got some good tips too when we were there. Well, another item that they look for with UNESCO, an effort to promote crafts and folk art with festivals, exhibitions, fairs, and markets. Well, of course, Quilt Show would be the granddaddy of them all. But then also our Lowertown Art and Music Festival, which it's still evolving, but it has all of those very things that they're asking for, and as does the Downtown After Dinner, and I will never get used to the new name.
Live on Broadway.
Live on Broadway, which has had a whole different type of artist being a part of that. We really do have the depth here.
We do.
But thank goodness for the city having a vision for the downtown and Lowertown, not just in building the creative community, but preserving what we do have and making sure we are authentic. And those are all so core to our being, who we are and our identity. And it's amazing that it's not that we're the only ones doing it, but it's not happening as much as you wish it was. And we're out there promoting it and trying to reap the benefits of the investments that have been made.
And that was one of the things that struck me when I was listening on that first day to presentations by several of the different leaders, is that Paducah is right on top. I mean, we're doing all the right things. So it was great to have that affirmation.
I loved it that we were invited to, as we have submitted our application, and Rosemarie, who is the author of the application, and I love that, but in our contact with UNESCO, on first name basis with Doyen in Paris, and the State Department with Aaron,
right.
Who follows us very closely and has worked with us paragraph by paragraph on the application process, and you just can't say enough. We also met him when we were in Washington, D.C. with the Chamber fly-in. I lost my train of thought. I loved it when Mayor Paxton received a wonderful invitation to Seoul to join with the Mayor's Round Table, and I was thrilled that he sent you as Mayor Pro Tem. The mayors were all there.
It was a great experience to meet the mayors from all over the world, and how genuine they were, and how excited they all were about being there, being able to make those presentations, because they realized the importance of it.
There was one line in that letter, which I was privileged to read the letter from that mayor, that let me know he knew about Paducah. He knew about the city's efforts to grow Lowertown, the artist relocation program, the preservation efforts, and spoke of those in his letter, and wanting to learn from one another, which is what a network is all about. And I have to really say, this is a network. Many things have been happening within UNESCO, a lot of different politics, but this part of UNESCO, although their office itself is funded, the network is just that, working together to promote one another, and I'm very proud of that. We didn't join this are not attempting to join this organization in order to get money. I hope that it will help in grants, but there was something I just read this morning, that the cities that belong, which there are already 26 members in the Creative Cities Network, that this is what they use as their brand, the UNESCO Creative Cities.
Right, it's very powerful. In fact, when we were in Seoul, we saw it on the buildings. I think that when you can prove that your destination is a UNESCO creative city, it gives you quite a reputation. If you the theme for this year's conference was, well, in 2004 it was creative tourism, but this year's conference was urban sustainability based on creativity.
Yes.
And so it was more of an economic development take, but it's just a changing economy. It's very much a global economy now, and creative industries can really take the lead and help your individual cities, individual artists, all of them, to really not just survive, but to soar in their own industry right now. And I think that that was a wonderful theme to discuss with those cities that were there, as well as the candidate cities. And one thing that Doyen Lee did mention is that there is the Creative Cities Network, but every city that was there also had their own network that they could bring to the network. This would really, I mean, Iowa City is the only other creative city in the United States, and they have been very proactive in using it. They have a festival that's strictly, theirs is a city of literature, so they have a festival that's strictly a literature festival, and they use the UNESCO brand for that. They bring in all the other cities of literature and get them involved in that. And Mary, I loved it how you said we can be partnering with them as well, with some of our writers groups and some of the authors that are in our community, and our library has some wonderful programs. And I think even the network is starting to see that there are designations that are starting to kind of cross over each other. Now Santa Fe is a city of design as well as a city of folk arts and crafts.
I really saw that as we were doing our presentations, and there's nothing like seeing your name in your bio in Korean. But I love
international
this. International, yes. I love this. This one, the presentation on the second day of the conference. There was only 2 days. It was a very quick trip. 2 30-hour days of travel out of 5. Whew, was a killer. But the candidate cities, there were 16, and I was in the second panel, and I'm sitting across here. The pictures do look like you're at the UN. Everyone's got their little earpiece on. Of course, the mayors and the mayor pro tems were all, vice mayors, they call them, were all sitting in the very front in their special seats. But across, here's my panel. I mean, it's the mayor of Jaipur, India, the mayor of Niigata, Japan, myself, the mayor of Riobamba, Ecuador, mayor of Sapporo, Japan, who has hosted the Winter Olympics, mayor of Tsusaka, Japan, the city manager, I would say, it's the CEO of the City of York in the United Kingdom, and the CEO of Pilot Theater of New York. It's a pretty big time crowd. But there's nothing like a PowerPoint to equalize everything. I was very proud of ours. UNESCO has asked for it to be posted, if they had permission to post it on their website, so you can see it there. I'm sure it translates as well. Or you may see it on Channel 11 from here at the college, our public access, where I gave the presentation to the City Commission. It was a wonderful time. Several of these cities were presenting for more than one designation. I thought we were very focused, and Rosemary and I agreed that the reason we thought that they were asking us to be on their website was because we did address their points one by one, their guidelines. We did take a little bit of time the first day, and we went to, because we were down where the high rises were in the inner city, we went to the old section of town and enjoyed that.
An area where you don't drive, it's strictly pedestrian, and a lot of the craftsmen were there, so we got to see a lot of the fiber arts.
Quilting, clothing.
Right, clothing, handmade, beautiful silk and cotton items, and we got to go in and see a craftsman who did jewelry
and pearls.
And the copper that was there now.
Oh, the
she
copper
didn't do the copper,
beautiful,
but
right.
It was really interesting to watch her work, and we asked if we could take a photograph, and she's no.
Yes, they were beautiful. She'll never give them away as a gift. I'm surprised you don't have them on now.
But I would just like to say a little bit about economic development, because I think a lot of people don't understand that this is just another layer to economic development. We have to look at that in a different light. we have to look at it many different ways. And this is just another layer of that economic development, and it brings people in. It has the capacity to bring companies in because of the networking.
Absolutely, that's
from
so
the
true.
United States and from all over the world. So
most definitely, and it is happening. Look around you. I mean, even down to the film festival, I was surprised. I mean, there must have been 10 countries that were represented in our film festival at the River's Edge just a couple of weeks ago. The artists in residence that come and have the interaction, teach classes, and leave art here. It's just never ending. We
and
are much more
the photography exhibit at Geyser that brings people from all over the world for entries.
I was really surprised, and I was surprised at the countries that keep reappearing. Who would have ever thought that Bangladesh? I know at the Quilt Museum, every time I go through, I look at the license plates. I'm always amazed. There's usually, probably 10 different states on any given day, but they talk about how many states and countries come on a monthly basis, and it's just a quietly happening here in town, and they are flying in. We made it to Korea with one stop. Gosh, people can come here, and we know they do. Every quilt show, we get to the media from France and from England, Germany, Japan. South Africa, Japan. There's been a lot of interaction. Bonnie Browning, Pat English teach classes all over. Australia, it's really happening. But this is when you see our brochures and it says "Feel the Movement," it really is happening here. I'm not sure of the translation when we were there, but I'm very proud of it. I hope you will be too. We're getting close on time. Get downtown and Lower Town. Know these artists. Know who's at the Quilt Museum. Check out those fabulous exhibits that really are world class. They can be in any city around the globe, and I'd be proud. Many of them are making their way around the globe. But know your community. Know what's happening. Be a part of it. It's too exciting not to. Stop in and see us down at the Visitors Bureau, 128 Broadway. You're always welcome to come in, see what we're doing, see those ads, because you won't see them in those local papers or the local magazines. We're advertising outside of the area to get that fresh new money into town to help us grow. Stop, see us, or check www.paducah.travel. It has connections to just about anything you want to know about in our community. Gail, she's there. Her door is always open.
Absolutely.
She's in Lower Town, right across from the old 9th Street house. Can't imagine who all you've had knock on that door. But she's everywhere I go. I know you'll see her out there. Stop and say hi. Thank you for your support of our city, our community, as we move forward and grow in this creative community, because we really are. Thank you. We'll see you next time.